Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nate Martin. Welcome to the Bitcoin Effect. Options on Blackrock's IBIT ETF. And also, is China going to pump Bitcoin even more? We're going to talk about that here on The Effect. Going into today, Bitcoin's price has jumped to over $66,000. It has since dipped back, but that is nearly a $9,000 increase from about 10 days ago. The market is generally bullish, and there are a number of reasons why, and we're going to go into at least one of those as we go through the news today. BlackRock's digital asset chief views Bitcoin as a risk-off asset, despite its recent alignment with U.S. stocks. Robbie Mitchnick compared Bitcoin to gold, highlighting its decentralized nature and limited supply as key differentiators. Now, he argues that, like gold, Bitcoin shows long-term low correlation with riskier assets, which makes it a safe haven option. While Bitcoin has surged 49% this year, partly due to ETF approvals, its performance contrasts with Ether's 15% rise, as Ether's narrative, that's still developing. So BlackRock's growing involvement in Bitcoin is evident through the success of its iShares Bitcoin Trust, which is the world's largest Bitcoin ETF, which signals a major shift in institutional attitudes towards the cryptocurrency. Now, this goes a step further than what we talked about last week, which is its 9-page article that we shared. Now, in as much as it was more vague on its position, that's meaning the article, and as much as with the amount of influence that BlackRock has on the markets, this position will only accelerate a wider adoption of Bitcoin as a safe haven asset. Speaking of BlackRock, the SEC recently approved listing options on BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust, offering investors new tools for hedging or speculating on Bitcoin. CryptoQuant reports that this move could boost liquidity and institutional participation in the Bitcoin market. Bitcoin options reached a high open interest of nearly $500 million on March 12th on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is a fivefold increase from last year's peak. Now, compared to futures, options attract longer-term investors, with contracts often extending beyond 4 months. Options on the IBIT ETF could allow investors to generate yield by selling covered calls on their Bitcoin holdings, but some say this could increase the paper Bitcoin supply as exposure grows without spot market transactions. Now, along those lines, I think that options on securities, they are a viable instrument for hedging. But I would wonder why you would actually want to trade options on a product that correlates with an asset like Bitcoin instead of just on the asset itself. Now, it seems more reasonable to go straight to the options market for Bitcoin, with the exception of the fact that I think that most exchanges only trade on European options and not American options. And the difference being that with American options, you can exercise the contract at any time during the contract period, as opposed to with European options, where you can only execute the contract on the date of expiry. Now, options aren't just a speculative instrument. There are practical uses for them. Now, for instance, if you're moving Bitcoin from one IRA to another, and you have to exchange your Bitcoin in that IRA into cash in order to move that, well, then buying a call contract close to the price at which you have to make the transfer, that insulates you from a sudden price jump while that cash is being transferred from one custodian to another. Another use of options as a hedging device is if you begin to get skittish about a bull run, but you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, so you can buy a put option, which works sort of like car insurance, in that if the price suddenly drops, then you can exercise that option to sell your Bitcoin at the contract price and then purchase it back at the lower market price. Now, granted, that contract may expire without the price going down, but that is the price of insurance. Now, this is not investment advice, just some things that I thought about, and we'll move on. Bitcoin's price has closely tracked the size of the People's Bank of China's balance sheet over the last 8 years, showing a positive 30-day correlation coefficient of 0.66. Now, as the PBOC considers a trillion won or $142 billion stimulus to support its economy. Asian stocks like the CSI 300 index have surged. Now, the stimulus could indirectly benefit Bitcoin, boosting investments in blockchain and crypto-related ventures. Bitcoin's correlation with the PBOC's balance sheet has remained mostly positive, while its correlation with the Federal Reserve's balance sheet has hit a record low. As China's stimulus aims to lower unemployment and spur growth, analysts expect it to support Bitcoin and other risk assets. Although we've already talked about that previously, that it's not really a risk-on asset, but the move looks to potentially bring long-term price gains. Simply put, when a government decides to add stimulus money to spur its economy, that acts as a debasement of its currency's purchasing power, effectively raising the price in that currency of Bitcoin because of Bitcoin's absolute scarcity. Again, showcasing Bitcoin as a risk-off asset. And finally, U.S. District Judge Catherine Polk-Faya ruled that Tornado Cash developer Roman Storm must face charges of money laundering, operating an unlicensed money transmitting business, and sanctions violations. She rejected Storm's defense that he was prosecuted for simply writing code, finding the Department of Justice's allegations credible. Now, Judge Faya noted Tornado Cash's similarity to other financial institutions and its VC funding, Relay or Feature, and Torn tokens. She emphasized that the charges relate to financial crimes and not free speech, as the software allegedly facilitated money laundering and sanctions evasion. Storm's claim that software is exempt under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act was dismissed. He's set to stand trial in December, facing up to 45 years if convicted. Now, there were a number of people that decried the decision by this judge regarding this case. A couple of them that I wanted to bring up. First of all, Amanda Tuminelli said that in the U.S. versus Storm, it's hard to decide what to be most offended by, but here are some of the choices. And she lists some of the things, including that there was only one sentence that was dedicated to the IEEPA charge. Going on, Jake Chervinsky said this will go down in history as a perversion of law and a travesty of justice. It will go down on appeal if that's what it takes. And finally, Zach Shapiro made 7 points, and I want to really touch on the first and the last ones. And the first one is that the Bank Secrecy Act, according to her ruling, doesn't require control for money transmission. Now, that brings up the specter that we talked about a number of months ago of Lightning Network nodes. While they don't control the money that go through it, suddenly they become susceptible to being called an unlicensed money transmitter, which is why we lost Wasabi Wallet and a number of other companies here in the U.S. Because of the fear of being subject to the SEC or court proceedings, because they're going to be named an unlicensed money transmitter, basically calling them a bank. And finally, the bottom one here that says no 1A protection for financial activities using blockchain, meaning that the First Amendment doesn't apply. So even though blockchain, specifically Bitcoin, is censorship resistance, what they're saying is that the financial activities on those are subject to government scrutiny and potentially prosecution. And that is a scary prospect. And that is one of the fronts that Bitcoin and the freedom to transact, that is one of the fronts that we're facing in this battle for freedom and for financial freedom. What are your thoughts on these issues? I look forward to hearing your comments on these news items, specifically China, as well as the Tornado Cash developments. That's it for this week's Bitcoin Effect. I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing your comments. And if this is your first time here, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We would look forward to having conversations with you through the comments, and as well as in some of the posts that I put on throughout the week. I look forward to seeing you next week.